Hello, people. Hello, lovely people. Good to be back doing another live stream. I'm just talking us in to hopefully people will start joining. I haven't done a live stream for a while. They've been a bit sporadic now. I've been writing my book and trying to get that together. And this is sort of part of all that research that I'm just going to come in and drop in with you. Hi, Green Tea and Margaret. Good to see you. I'm going to start talking and get on with it, as Liz keeps advocating me to do. So I'll come back in and drop into the chat and have a chat with you after I've finished talking, but I'll be interested to see your comments about all this. Funny enough, Mari was just sending a message to Liz about a very similar thing, or some elements of what I'm going to talk about now. But the amazing picture that we can see in the image is of the beautifully named galactic bulge, or the galactic center. I think it was only discovered or photographed, that's probably not the right word, 2022. It's known now as Sagittarius A star. But the question is, or one of the questions is the galactic center God? This apparently was something that the very interesting scientists who's looking at science in relation to consciousness and the spiritual, Rupert Sheldrake, and he believed that it's sentient. It is basically God. Whether or not this is true or not, it is certainly a scientific fact, shall we say, that, or astrophysicists have argued, have found evidence. They believe that these supermassive black holes, such as this galactic center, are where the origins of the galaxies around them come from. They eject all these highly energetic particles, plasma jets, which produce electromagnetic radiation on multiple frequencies. These interact with clouds of gas and leads to the formation of new emerging galaxies. They produce stars. So this is probably where, I say the Big Bang, that's the whole universe, isn't it? But this is basically where our galaxy came from, the origin, the center, and everything comes out from this. So you can certainly call it, say it's the source. People often talk in a spiritual sense of, we need to connect to the source. We need to not the source drinking too much, but the SOURCE, the source. And this is most definitely the source of our galaxy. Is where all the material for our universe, the matter, it's where it's produced. It's where it all begins millions of years ago, and where it keeps on producing, keeps on sending out these plasma, keeps on creating these new stars. So it's a constant form of creation. I suppose the idea of it being sentient, this connects in, for anyone that listened to my plasma talk or has seen Robert Temple, read his book, A New Science of Heaven. That definitely seems so much of that connects these scientific ideas again with the spiritual. And he talked in there, I mean, he was talking about these plasma clouds that have been recently discovered that are just sort of orbiting around Earth, or in a fixed position but outside our atmosphere. These fields of clouds of, and he was arguing that they were sentient because they would have, if you like, all these billions of neural connections like a giant brain, and that they probably existed for millions of years, and so they could have in that time developed the most incredible consciousness, and they would have this amazing knowledge and memory, obviously not a consciousness in terms of a human one, but still potential for sentience. And Robert Temple, I remember in his book also talking about how he believed similarly there could be forms of consciousness in the sun, in planetary bodies, in supposedly inanimate matter. And this of course very much coincides with ancient mythological, religious, spiritual beliefs from all sorts of indigenous people, that everything in the universe has a spirit. It's animate in that respect, that there is a spiritual force to it as well as just material. Yeah, green tea, definitely recommend Robert Temple. A New Science of Heaven, I believe, is the book which I've got. Hi Mab. And it's fascinating stuff, and I do agree, Margaret. I think it is where it's at. So this galactic center, you could say, is, well, certainly in our galaxy, it is the biggest, most amazing concentration of plasma that there is. I think it's something like 4 million times the size of our sun, which is just a mind-boggling thing to even try and get your head around. So this produces an enormous amount of plasma and light, as you can imagine. Now, Andrew Collins, there seems to be a lot of connections with a number of commentators writing about the things that I'm going to start talking about. I've mentioned Robert Temple in terms of plasma, but then I've just recently been reading the newest book by Andrew Collins. Obviously, I've talked to you about him before. I went on the megalithomania tour of Turkey, and this book Karahan Tepe is fascinating in terms of talking about not just that site but other sites in the area, but also looking at the serpent mythology, and that site, particularly Karahan Tepe, has all sorts of serpent iconography. It's basically in the structure of one of the enclosures is in the shape of a snake's head. There's all these windy grooves, like channels between the enclosures that might possibly have had liquid poured down them at some stage. This pillar shrine has these strange shaped pillars, which also could be considered to have a serpent aspect. Now, I'll go into a bit more of that later, but Collins was, along with studies he's done with Rodney Hale, who's this astroarchaeologist, that the alignment of Karahan Tepe was towards this, what's called the Dark Rift. I'll show an image of that. Well, actually, let me just jump ahead. So the Dark Rift, I believe, is this area of the Milky Way where there's all these dust clouds which obscure the stars, so it appears to us to be dark from out where we are now. But as I understand it, the galactic center is around this location. So it's the galactic center isn't normally under visible with the naked eye, and not in our time at the moment anyway. But it's very interesting in terms of the alignment. There's also another alignment with the winter solstice, and this strange head shape that protrudes from the pillar shrine wall. And Hugh Newman and J.J. Ainsworth, who also did the Megalithomania tour, they basically by accident saw that they viewed winter solstice alignment where the rising sun, the sun hit this head, and you can see that the video of that on the Megalithomania channel. But it's very interesting when Karahan Tepe was built, which is maybe sort of 11,000 years ago, that sort of time period. This galactic center would have been in a line directly behind our sun, as from this viewing it from the Earth and from this position where Karahan Tepe is. So not only would this be on a perfect alignment with the winter solstice sun at that time, but the galactic center is actually behind it, if you like. Okay, thousands of light years behind it, but it's, if you like, it seems to make sense to me, and Collins was also saying that this ties in with so many of these old cults and sects, mystery schools, the Orphic mystery schools, the Orphite Gnostic texts, Neoplatonic, Mithraic traditions have this idea of a hypercosmic sun, like a sun behind the sun. The Pythagoreans talked of a central fire. So if you basically think of the galactic center as the most enormous fire you can imagine, which was thought to occupy the center of the cosmos. So this is quite incredibly striking with what modern astrophysics has found. The sun behind the sun was said to cast forth its tongues of fire to affect creation, which is obviously what the galactic center does do. Everything that's created in our galaxy originated in that galactic center. Tongues of fire to affect creation in the material universe. And also, as sort of an illustration, Collins had examples of pictures by Robert Flood, who seems like a fascinating guy that I'd like to find out more. I think he may have been interested in alchemy, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, but he was one of these genius polymaths, visionaries, who was a scientist of his day. This is in the 17th century. But he also came up with these amazing drawings, and it seems very much, well, a supermassive black hole, the galactic center. But this idea of a sun behind a sun, I suppose there's a series of images which you can find on the internet. You may be familiar with them anyway. But he referred also to, sorry, bear with me just a moment while I just forward on my notes. He referred to the creation of the material universe from the primary appearance of created light. And I think these references to light, John Dee also, I think in quite early works of his, talked about his theories of light connecting everything up in the universe. I think these people, Flood, Dee, referring to light, and when you read in these old mysterious alchemical texts, one of which I went through on a previous talk, when they talk about fire and the effect of fire in causing a transmutation of the primary material. Well, in macrocosm, that's what the galactic center does. That is the greatest fire in the galaxy, and that is transmuting of the void, if you like. It's producing almost out of nothing with these bursts of plasma energy, and it's creating matter, which will go on to then be the building blocks for stars of our galaxy, the solar systems, the planets, and us, and everything else. So I really think increasingly, so much in modern science, whether it's plasma, astrophysics, quantum physics, is really connecting up with so many of these ancient ideas. And when you consider that so many of these ancient ideas are in line with these modern science, where, you know, the incredible technology now is the only time that they've been able to discover these things. On the one hand, I think there is definitely a visionary aspect where I think there are people with abilities that can connect to source, maybe, whether it is the galactic center itself, but they can have an instinctive, intuitive understanding of these things. Another possibility is that the ancient people had knowledge of these cycles, which I'm going to go onto in a little bit, because I've mentioned Karahan Tepe, but so many of these megalithic sites, if not nearly all of them, certainly the famous ones, whether it's Stonehenge or Göbekli and Karahan Tepe or the pyramids in Egypt, many other throughout the ancient world, these megalithic sites have obviously constructed with great intricacy to show the alignments, to be connected with alignments of the solstices, the equinoxes, charting the passage of different heavenly bodies, if you like, across the sky. And I think, as a number of commentators have said, Jay Widener and Bridges, I always forget poor Mr. Bridges' first name, the late great Vincent Bridges. I always want to call him Michael Bridges, and that's, I think, a footballer of like the past gone by. But I've obviously talked a lot about that in the past. Their book, Jay Widener, whose Reality Check channel I recommend, and Vincent Bridges, and they did this incredible work, The Mysteries of the Great Cross of Henday, Alchemy in the End of Time. And the major thesis of that was that the essential element of alchemy, apart from the fact that it's all about transformation, not just as people understand alchemy as being a way of transmuting a base metal like lead into gold, but it's much more about a spiritual transformation that occurs within the individual person, within the alchemist, and it's all about that kind of transmutation. But also, on a much more cosmic level, it's about how, well, if you like, everything, the cosmos changes, but time is crucial. The timing of when alchemical experiments are done is crucial. And what a number of people are saying, I believe, also, I just haven't fully read, but I've heard Sheldon Moore talking. He did a series of 3 talks on Reality Check, Jay Widener's channel. You may be familiar with him, but he was saying that these ancient sites, the reason that they're such precise calendars for plotting the stars, is because they know that these particular times when things are aligned, whether it's just the solstice, which obviously occur every year, but also these greater cycles, they are the times of the highest energy, and that probably equates to when the it's flood FLUWD. But these are these are the times when the energy is at its strongest, and that this probably is why so many ancient texts like the Vedic Yugas in Hinduism, they talk about cycles in terms of the yugas. You know, it's in thousands of years, but this principle of certain times when there will be a greater force of energy, and that will allow a transformation of everything and everyone. So it's not just a transmutation on a personal level or of one object or piece of metal. These are cosmic transmutations. And the reason that the ancients were so dedicated and studied so deeply these changes in the movements of the stars and the planets, and this is of course where astrology was born, and this is all about finding the time and knowing the time when the energy is going to be strongest, because those are the times when you want to have the ceremonies, the rituals that you will be able to achieve some sort of transformation. You have the greatest power. Thought it was interesting as well, just in a little aside really, in terms of one of these as above so below type of things. This image, you know, looks like an eye as well, and obviously there's so many cases where something at a cosmic level, it's been noted that you look at galaxies and the images of the galaxies now, where they'll link up, and it looks almost identical to the images of a brain and how all the different how that's wired. So as I say, it's quite it seems quite a coincidence that it's just in recent years that these sites in Turkey have been uncovered, and after thousands of years, it's now again in a position, you know, talking about Karahan Tepe, but these other sites where they are again aligned to this galactic center, so that the alignment with the solstices will have this galactic center behind it. As Collins said, he uses the word serendipitous, that this has been uncovered now. But then there's lots of strange things about what's happening with these sites. And I know Bright Insight has talked about it and questioned about Göbekli Tepe, why they've said they're not going to excavate anymore. There's only a tiny percentage that's been excavated so far, and they're going to stop now and not do any more and save it for future generations to work on. And this just seems just like madness. And then there's a thing on the Megalithomania site. Hugh Newman posted that they're erecting a roof now over Karahan Tepe, which they already have done over Göbekli Tepe. What's been uncovered there, which when I visited, and you know, I'm sure they will say, well, they put the roof there because they need to protect it and all the rest of it. But the archaeologists have been quite strong in saying that they believe that roofs were over these sites anyway when they were built. They always had roofs. I know, I think Andrew, Hugh, not sure if that's the case or not, but they've checked, and where they've studied these alignments, like this winter solstice sunrise alignment that Hugh and JJ saw at Karahan Tepe, and they were saying even if at the time the builders of it did have a roof of some sort over it, it would still allow the hole, the portal stone, if you like, the gap where the sun sort of shines through to direct this ray onto this stone head. That would still work even if there was a roof. But they're a bit concerned that they're hoping that this new modern roof that's being erected now is not going to somehow disrupt this alignment, because I think it's the kind of thing, I'm not even sure. I know, or I believe anyway, that when Hugh and JJ first discovered this, it was poo-pooed, as these things are, by the archaeological establishment. They don't like things being discovered that they haven't discovered, and you know, they may have just said, oh, it's, you know, it's an accident, it's not important, that sort of thing. So if they've got that sort of attitude, then, and they've got no interest in the implications of it, then maybe they wouldn't care if they blocked out such an alignment with this roof. But the conspiracy theorist in me, you know, you start to wonder why they're doing these things. Why cover up things? Why refuse to dig things and excavate to reveal what, I mean, what already has been found at Göbekli Tepe is incredible. And to think that's only, I think it's something like less than 10% of the site, when they've done this sort of geothermal imaging and that sort of thing, they're sure that there's an enormous amount that's still uncovered. And to just say, well, we're not going to bother with it anymore, it just seems to make no sense. On an archaeological level, you've made this incredible discovery already. Why would you not want to be, why would you not want to keep further, you know, this must be, you'd think it was the dream of every archaeologist, and the most important thing in their lives would be to keep this going. So it does give the impression, give the idea, especially Bright Insight was sort of looking at the connections, the company that's got charge of the site, in some sort of partnership with the Turkish authorities, and this is run by a sort of billionaire who's also a member of the World Economic Forum. So questions there. That, I suppose, will go into my, what this sort of, I'm going to talk about towards the end of the talk, but this idea of, are the powers that be, I think we know the answer, but the ways that they're trying to block where these alignments, where possibly these different the different cycles that we're coming into, maybe are a time when we, for everyone, have a potential for some sort of greater transformation, both personally and for the whole of the world. It seems like, well, we know that they're trying to restrict that. And if you consider, I think I used information in the sort of little note about what the stream was about, and you get information, I don't fully grasp it, but in terms of sort of when people talk about information in terms of computing systems and AI, quantum physics, when they're talking about information, I suppose you could view it as if like everything is, when you look at mathematics and how it's like everything is numbers, and everything can be assigned a number, all these different formulas, and and if you like information in that at that level, it's just relating to that, the pure mathematics, if you like, for everything in the universe. It's that sort of information. And when they talk about quantum computing, I think they're this idea that you can go into the deepest parts of this formulas that control things, and you can manipulate it. So I think what we're getting, what we do always get from the sun, is this information, which is the energy that we obviously all need to live. But perhaps there's another level to that. It's not just, obviously it's, we do need the sunlight to keep us alive, but there's something more. It's like this flow of information. But and so in the way the powers that be are not just withholding information in terms of keeping back, not telling us about what's going on and deceiving us, they're actually stopping the flow of information, which is energy, which is the very essence of what makes the universe. So Sheldon Moore, I think he was talking, apparently I just didn't I haven't heard it, but Mari was mentioning to Liz that Cliff High has also been talking about the idea of us, I think, being closer to the galactic center now. I think Thomas Sheridan put on Facebook about, does the sun look more yellow to you? Liz had said the same thing to me. Murray was agreeing, and she said maybe that's to do with this thing about the galactic center. I was thinking, well, that's a coincidence. That's just what I'm going to be talking about. But it seems to make sense to me, as I say, with these ancient, so many of the ancient texts talking about a sun behind the sun. And also, I mean, looking at this flood picture, there's the philosophies about the black sun as well. So this idea of a supernormal sun with extra power that will sorry, there's a little pop-up come up on the computer. This extra power that's gonna, or these extra rays of plasma energy that's gonna, when you think that that's the building blocks of creation, so it's like getting an extra power surge. Sheldon Moore, he was, I think he was saying that there might be some cycles that, in terms of the galactic center, but he was wondering as well if we were actually part of some binary star system in a way, but so another sun, but this other sun, it's, you know, it's distant normally, so it's only however many, you know, hundreds, thousands of years will become closer to this other sun, so that there's actually some, again, an increase in plasma energy, different frequencies, and that corresponds maybe to these cycles like the yugas that have been written about for centuries. I mean, the other thing, apart from visionary knowledge, and of course, like we can see with the alignments of these megalithic sites, they did have an incredible knowledge of the cycles of the cosmos. But when you're talking about cycles that are hundreds of thousands of years, you wonder then, is it also evidence for the fact that this knowledge has been passed on to them because it's been passed on from civilizations that were around these hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years ago, so they know about these cycles because they were there the previous time? And then of course it comes into where some people say that it's alien civilizations, alien consciousness that passed on this knowledge, but also others talk about previous ancient civilizations like Atlantis, Hyperborea, Shambhala, and the idea that they were thousands of years old and they existed and had this great advanced knowledge. and that they were then destroyed, or at least partially destroyed, by a cataclysm. Obviously, this has very much been Graham Hancock's theme for recent times and his Netflix series, and this is talked about as well by Collins and J. Widener and Bridges, and the idea of, in terms of us having cycles where we pass through different parts of the galaxy and have in closer proximity to the galactic center. Now, as I say, they're hopefully, and there's a positive outcome of those things, and this extra energy is transformational in a positive sense. But the other negative idea is also that it can create cataclysms. It can be destructive, and it can cause horrendous change, negative change. Now, the Hancock's talked about with Randall Carlson, etc. This, like the idea of the Younger Dryas, which is obviously something that's been scientifically found, where I think it was around 10,000 plus years ago, 10, 11,000 years ago, there was this huge cataclysm, potentially meteor showers and causing volcanic activity, melting of glaciers, and it just had a devastating effect, particularly on the northern hemisphere. And some have surmised, including Hancock, that this destroyed an advanced civilization, and then potentially the remnants of this were sort of spread and around the planet, and went to these different, found their way to different parts of the world where more primitive groups of humans, and then all these different myths of figures that would suddenly appear and have all this great knowledge and would pass this knowledge on and teach the indigenous people science, construction, agriculture, all these different things, and that these were people, the remnants of these great civilizations that got destroyed through this apocalypse. Now, both Widener and Collins refer to the work of La Follette. I'm going to mispronounce his name, so let me just get it in front of me so I don't do the man a disservice. I was sad to read he died in 2022. Paul La Violette. So he again wrote about the galactic center and it's sending out these bursts of high energy cosmic rays. But he was saying, like, at certain times there's a particular burst that triggered changes in the Earth, and that it's that caused this climate cataclysm around the Younger Dryas period, and that this can again happen in like giant cycles of thousands of years. So one of the themes of Vitamin Bridges' book, and when they talk at the end about this Great Cross of Henday, they believe that that's got coded messages on there to predict a time of when the next cycle will come and when there will be another catastrophe. I think the date they predicted has gone now, thankfully, but it's one of these things with these great cosmological time where it's things might be a few hundred years out and still, you know, within the cycle. But yeah, Lafayette we called it the galactic superwave theory. He believed this happened around 13,865 BCE, but people are linking it in with the Younger Dryas cataclysmic event, which was actually, as I say, about 10,800 BCE. But what Collins discussed, again in relation to mythologies around the world, is that again this might be encoded into our mythologies and the constellations and their connections that they have. So around this dark rift area, which, as I say, is around where the galactic center is, so you have Scorpius, which obviously relates to the scorpion, and this is one of the images that's on the vulture stone, pillar 43 at the enclosure D, Göbekli Tepe. So it has a vulture, and it's on its right wing, I suppose, if it's like that. It's got this ball, and as I mentioned in previous talks, partly this is probably the head of this headless figure that's down the bottom of there, and it relates to the head was the center of the soul. So in that time, in that region, people's heads were removed after death because that's where the soul was supposed to reside. So this image could relate to the soul of the deceased going into the afterlife, and in many mythologies, the afterlife, or the hole in the sky that was seen as a gateway to the afterlife was again this dark rift, this hole in the galaxy, as they saw it, which, as it happens, as I say, is around the area of the galactic center, which is the source. And so many legends, Native American tribes as well, would have it that the soul's journey would go up to this area of the Milky Way to go through to the afterlife. So this image on pillar 43 probably does relate to that, but at the same time, this circle, sort of ball shape, could also relate again to this galactic center, this opening in the galaxy. So what Collins and others following on from Lafayette's work were suggesting is that with the mythology of around this constellation, it could relate because you've got the stinger there, sort of directing to the heart of the galactic center. So maybe this relates to legends, a memory of this cataclysm, and if it did happen, like Lafayette says, because of some great pulse of energy that maybe produces, which maybe had the effect of causing all these meteor storms, but it could have been viewed, it could have been, an incredible bright light in the sky that was visible to the naked eye, and then seeing this like lightning preceding thunder, they saw that, the ancient peoples, and then following it, the rocks, flaming rocks, fell from the sky and total disaster ensued. So they could, this associating with the scorpion, this being the stinger of the scorpion, it could be that obviously the scorpion sting can kill, it can destroy, it can poison a person. So it could be seen as relating to a memory of when from this center of the galaxy the stinger points to, was where this destruction was meted out onto the earth. No worries, Pete. Speak to you soon. Johnny, good to see you. So I think that's a very compelling idea, and there's lots in there as well. In Connor's book, as I say, about serpent mythology, which I'll go into another time, and that's this constellation there is called Serpens, and there are a number of mythologies around the world where the scorpion and the snake, there's figures that sort of interchange between the two. I've actually got, you can't see it from there, I actually got Liz, when I was in Turkey, a design of Shamarang, who's still a very prominent goddess figure in that area around Turkey, and I think the Kurdish people on the border of Syria. Shamarang's part snake, part scorpion. So I won't go into any more about that legend now, but Andrew Collins goes into quite a lot in his book. So there's that twofold thing, which I suppose is always the way, isn't it? There's destruction and creation. So this galactic center, it's the source of creation and where everything comes from. But maybe it's also the source of great destruction. And I suppose that will also tie up, well, if you like, a lot of apocalyptic religious theory is around that there's an apocalypse, a great cataclysm, but then after that there's a great transformation and a new world order. And it seems to me a lot of secret societies, but also religions, as we know, aspects of Christianity and Judaism from which it came, they're almost wanting, is part of the prophecy, that there will be a great cataclysm, there will be this apocalypse, and that is needed, that is required. You can't have this transformative new world unless you have the cataclysm. But it seems to me that the powers that shouldn't be, that are connected with these cults, with these religious beliefs in many cases, are trying to make an apocalypse, a man-made apocalypse, because they want the prophecies to be fulfilled. But it's not really a prophecy so much if you're actually making it happen, if you know what I mean. But it's all a part. I think it seems to me, particularly what's happening in the world at the moment, in the Middle East, and what's happening with Israel, that I think, like a number of commentators said, it seems that they're trying to instigate this war that is in the prophecies, Gog and Magog, which is required, because after that, then they will come to their rightful place as lords of the earth. So I think for me, I suppose in their view, when you talk about trying to affect transformation, and that's what magic's all about, of course. And Aleister Crowley, he came from a background in, was it Plymouth Brethren? So again, they had, I believe, this very much this sort of apocalyptic view of Christianity. So this, I think, a lot of maybe this magic practice, again, it ties in with these ideas of needing to instigate destruction in order to have creation, as one follows the other. Now, as I mentioned at the top, this definitely this talk about the alignments, the plasma, the energy, relates to alchemy, and that's certainly what the Widener and Bridges talking about in their book. So I'm just going to read a quote from Jay Widener's book. Alchemy, the art of transmutation, is based on an understanding of the unified field of matter, energy, and information, involving an interlocking series of transformations that demonstrates the identity of these three components of the field. The key to these transformations is the ability to communicate. That is the mechanism of this communication is the phenomenon of photon emission and absorption. Light, particularly coherent light, can cause chemical reactions, and on the organic level, it can cause profound effects, such as the process of photosynthesis, where the energy of light is used to build proteins and sugars. So, just to break off there, I mean, that is a very basic scientific concept, which, when you think about it, it's a good point. Light, just in plants, this chemical reaction within the plants caused by the light, and it builds proteins and sugars. It creates something of building blocks of life, if you like, a microcosm version of what the galactic center is doing, throwing out all these bursts of plasma energy, which are creating new stars and planets and all the rest of it. This is a tiny microcosm of it, but it's this idea that light can create new matter or create new life on the earth. So just to go on with the quote from Wyden and Bridges, for the last 20 years, various molecular biologists have proposed and experimentally demonstrated that all living cells emit a very weak photon pulse generated by each cell's DNA. This pulse is regular enough to be considered a form of coherent light, and some researchers have speculated that biophoton activity is a form of language. This fascinates me because my thing is all about language rather than science particularly, but I'm interested in the fact that they use all these terms like communication and information in terms of these building blocks of life and energy and light. So Fritz Albert Popp and Mai Wan Ho speculated in a 1993 paper that this phenomenon points to the existence of an amplifying mechanism in the organisms receiving the information and acting on it. Specifically, the living system itself must also be organized by intrinsic electromagnetic fields capable of receiving, amplifying, and possibly transmitting electromagnetic information in a wide range of frequencies. So to me, well, I'm going to connect this as well, again, going back to plasma, Robert Temple, but I believe Sheldon Moore talked about this, other people have talked about it, but there is a ball of plasma within all of us. I mean, it makes up 99% maybe of the universe potentially. So the idea of whatever on the earth, us, different forms of life, the living organism, that will have these electromagnetic fields which then would react with the light, the plasma, the energy from the sun, from the galactic center. So this interaction will be what creates something new. So there's this passage of information that could be from the cosmos, and this gives a scientific basis for, you know, astrology. Of course, not just the sun, but the movements of the planets and the moon. Of course, the moon affects the tides. You know, as people have said, we're majority water. It's going to affect us in some way as well. So this pull of different energies there must be a receiving field within the organism, and then the light can react on that. But so this is talking about a DNA level. So like we talked about photosynthesis, but this is, you know, suggesting that DNA can be affected by light. So I would say, again, if you look at astrology and the idea of the way the planets, the sun, different bodies are aligned at the time of someone being born, it's talking about affecting DNA. This is going to be affecting how someone grows up, how they look, they act, because it's these building blocks of life and how we evolve, and this then will get passed on in our DNA to others. So this idea is similar to the notion of morphogenetic fields, which is again Rupert Sheldrake talks about these fields, biological entities, memory, forms a field surrounding each entity, which is a blueprint for the species and individual development. This is sensitive to actions at a distance through space and time. One aspect of alchemy might be the ability to communicate with another entity's morphogenetic field. The alchemists believe that minerals were also living entities. This idea, again, that everything has a spirit, even if it's supposedly inanimate. And therefore they had to have auras or souls. And these are, again, similar to these morphogenetic fields. So clearly everything is energy. We are all energy. Everything in the universe is energy. So quite clearly from that, when this increase in plasma or a different direction, frequency of it that may come from the galactic center, or maybe a stronger alignment, maybe a second sun, a second star in alignment with ours, that can affect the makeup of our bodies, even down to our DNA level. There was also mention in Jay's book about cymactics, where wave patterns of sound create geometric shapes. So different volumes and pitches, different frequencies will change the shape. And it's quite an amazing thing to see. I guess probably a number of you have seen it. I'm sure there's lots of it on the internet. So again, it's like sort of chaos theory, whether these things, there's patterns everywhere, and they can be affected by a different energy field, if you like, a different frequency of sound in this case, not light, but it's the way that something from a distance, from outside, can transform the pattern of a different kind of matter. So I think that's just another version, and there has been a lot written. Andrew Collins did on his recent talks at the last symposium, Glastonbury, a lot of research that was looking at Stonehenge and how that could be like a sonic temple and all these different acoustics. And Collins and Hugh Newman have done a lot of research on these enclosures at Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, and then also there's been a lot done in Egypt, and a lot of the constructions they're in these, the geometry of them is constructed in such a way often that there's these 4-3 in terms of the sizing of the enclosures, 4x3, which produces this perfect pitch. So there's all these acoustics, and that comes obviously much more into the more modern era with churches, cathedrals, modern sacred spaces, or relatively modern sacred spaces. Again, they very often are constructed so that they're ways of emphasizing sound, emphasizing different acoustics, different kinds of pitches. Again, because this is something that transforms. It's another form of information where it creates a different field of energy, which will have a bodily but also a mental, create a mental or bodily change in the people who experience it. So Wieden Bridges also talked about DNA, and they believe that again, this is talking around alchemy and the transformative abilities of alchemy. What the other aspect is not so much what the alchemist is doing to a piece of metal or something, but it's the transformation. The matter of the person doing it would also absorb energy, the information of transmutation, through long sequences of non-genetic coding, what they call junk DNA, which is the majority of our genetic code, which is divided between introns and extrons. Extrons are good laser pulsars, weak burst coherent light several times a second. Introns read incoming light and adjust indirectly various internal processes. These like things like the circadian rhythms. So what they're saying is that this energy can actually change our DNA at some level, and that this can obviously have a transformational effect on a person. Made me think again so much about serpents, which I won't go into now, but all these ideas of the Milky Way itself is viewed as like a dragon or a serpent in a lot of mythology. There's the Draco constellation, which used to be the North Star, Tepe, and that was built. And again, Draco is the associated with the dragon. In terms of earth energies, a lot of you will know, of course, that we've got ley lines and you've got dragon lines, as they're often referred to dragon lines in Asia. The idea of feng shui is around dragon lines, earth energies in this case, not. But then in this country as well, dragon lines around the ley lines. So again, and that sort of, I think it's been identified, I forget the name of the people that found it, but doused of the idea, Hamish was one of Hamish something Miller, the idea of these two lines of dragon energy around ley lines that were again snaking around, going on a sort of interlocking, flowing serpent-like, so-called dragon lines. And then I was thinking, if you're talking about DNA, of course you've got the double helix. Again, it's that spiral shape, which looks a bit sort of like a serpent. So as above, so below. Again, the connection between the greatest macro cosmic level and the tiniest DNA level within life on Earth. So Wieden Bridges was sort of saying almost as a bit of a conclusion that alchemy may in fact be as simple as changes in the nature of light create changes in the mind of nature, and the shift of the age in the sky signals profound change in the nature of both mind and light. So that's a nice summation, I think, of what we've been going through. And so where I was going at in terms of what's happening now in our modern era, obviously one level I just mentioned in passing, but of course we're talking about the sun being this great transmitter of energy, and of course they keep blocking it. I mean, I don't want to say too much on YouTube because we don't want to get kicked off. If we do, less nihilistic Mark, that's my YouTube channel. It's a backup, and we're on Rumble. So if we do ever get kicked out, find us there, but I'll try not to. But yeah, on that level, I would say they're trying to block the information by what they put between the sun and us, to just block that energy. And we all know, you know, Liz was saying the other day, and she's not a sun worshipper at all, but like been missing the sun because there's been just so much rain and all that. But it's just we need the sun. I mean, obviously it's just at the basic level we need vitamin D, but I think there's even more to it than that. And I think they're aware maybe that there is this extra strength, this extra energy that we're coming into now, these extra alignments, the different age we're in. Maybe it was whether it's proximity to the galactic center, whether it's a secondary star that's going to be in line, the sun behind the sun. But I think, you know, it seems like they're blocking it. But also just in terms of AI. Now I've listened to a lot, and well, there's a lot that I haven't listened to, but Jay Widener recently, and I know a number of people here. I don't want to alienate people, but you know, you probably know if you've been listening before that we don't really feel, we don't believe that Trump is unfortunately going to be a sort of savior to change the world for the positive. Not in the long term anyway. There may be some short term gains in some respects, and I certainly agree with some of the things that have been done to overturn things that were there before, but those things that were there before shouldn't have been there. But just, I think obviously there's the thing around Israel, which is I've mentioned before, and obviously he's very much connected with that. I've talked recently, Derek Bros, The Conscious Resistance is one, but there are a number of others, David Icke. It's been straight away as soon as Trump came in. Obviously he's got all this backing from these huge tech billionaires, these tech companies. JD Vance, vice president, of course, is connected with Peter Thiel. So it's all about big tech. And there was the big rollout almost on day 1 or 2 of the new administration about the new mRNA for tracing cancers. Now, it's always very difficult with things like this because, of course, anything and technology and science can do amazing things and it can save lives, but we know where it's been totally misused and there's been misinformation. Of course, again, that's a big thing of the day, isn't it? We'll talk about information on this, if you like, cosmic and microcosmic level, but just in terms of the normal understanding of the word information in terms of language, that's the general conversation where they say, oh, it's misinformation, we're all being kicked off the internet, please not us yet, off YouTube for misinformation. And this control of information on that level, on that language level, on that level of just controlling perception. So controlling mind with information, just on that pure language level. And of course they're saying that it's people like us that are doing the misinforming. We beg to differ and think it's more the other way, but that again is about flows of information and changing consciousness, of course, and we need the flow of information to be uninterrupted, to for there to be clear understanding, for there to be transformation that's positive. So I would say so much of what's happening is about trying to control the flow of information just on that basic language level and in terms of systems controls. But I think it is deeper than that. And when they talk about it in terms of AI going into the body, and again, I've got to be careful on YouTube, but of course there was a lot of discussion when the was introduced in post 2020 and all that malarkey from there on. And there was a lot of discussion because mRNA is about just this, again, I'm no expert, but it is all this stuff about, it's just this messenger DNA. It's not the actual deep genetic coding, so that this is just giving these instructions to these little bits of DNA to produce these proteins, which are going to do the good stuff and keep everybody safe. But then they're just going to disappear, and they're certainly not going to be doing any sort of rewriting of the genetic code that's going to do any significant transformations of our DNA. I think there had, well, I know there has been a lot of research, and there have been stuff, although you can't really find it on the internet unless you know the right places to look, but that there is stuff that will actually affect at a deeper level the DNA. And this is what would be if people like, some people will be afraid of what could happen now if these new plans come through. And again, it will be presented as being this life-changing thing. Thing is, we probably know where a vast number of percentage of the cancers are coming from. Again, I can't say it on YouTube because it would be said to be misinformation. But I think, again, what they're trying to do at the deepest level, well, at the surface level, they're trying to control information. But in the deep, and if you want, with what they're trying to block out the sun, they're trying to stop the information that way. But also they're trying to get inside to that microcosmic level to change the way that we receive information and to give the information that they want received, because they want a transformation or transmutation, but they want their kind, not the natural kind, not the positive kind, not something that's going to be transformative in a positive way for the majority of people. And perhaps it's just going to leave the great minority. I mean, the thing with all this is so much, there's all the language of they're pushing it, that AI, and especially like all these implants, obviously Musk has been involved with this, is it Neuralink? Again, the idea that humans could connect with AI, and they are talking about this as this will be the transcendence. They're talking about it in terms of how spiritual people over the centuries and people now would talk about it, but we would maybe talk about it in terms, well, we would talk about it in terms of achieving this through a connection with source, getting this information, getting it on a macro and micro level. But not in this artificial way. Again, we're in a world where everyone wants a quick fix. They want something that they can just pop in their mouth, or can be just given to them, inserted in them, that will just suddenly make them superheroes, or make everything go away that's bad and transform them. But it's not as easy as all that, is it? And it takes work on a psychological level, but I think also, perhaps, I'm optimistic that we are coming into an age where it maybe will be easier, and there will be more of this energy that we can tap into. And as some people have argued, maybe that's why they're throwing the kitchen sink at us in recent years, because they're trying desperately to restrict the information, the good information from source, so they can control it and get their form in. And interesting, just as an aside, because that's another claim which is something, it's interesting, and I'm going to do more on it. But with people like Bellino, who I did a talk on in the past, Paul Wallace, but these people that have talked about, gone back to the old original texts of the Bible, these ancient, and obviously I know Zechariah Sitchin is someone that's famous for interpreting these old texts and seeing it as a extraterrestrial race that came here, and the almost set themselves over the humanity like warlords, and part of that narrative is that they altered our DNA, and that they almost created modern humans because they spliced DNA, and they affected this just change in us. So it's interesting to consider that in the light of what's going on recently. That seems like a past version of what they're trying to do now. Just, I suppose, as an aside, really, but I thought it was interesting. I was reminded of this film, I don't know if anyone's seen it, called Transcendence. It was about 10 years ago now, 2014. I did see it because I saw it a few years ago, but it's interesting. It's Johnny Depp is the main star, but it's got quite an all-star cast. It was directed by a guy who sounds very much like a drug company, but it's not. But it's Wally Pfister, Pfister. His directorial debut, but he did a lot of work with Christopher Nolan. I think he's maybe a cinematographer, but did work on a lot of the great films that Christopher Nolan has done. But it was a bit of a flop, this film, so it sort of went under the radar because it didn't do very well. Maybe that's a good thing, but watching it is very interesting. But it's very much a propaganda thing, saying that this idea of AI controlling everything is a good thing. So, Johnny, I won't go into everything about the film, but Johnny Depp is this computer scientist guy, and basically he dies. There's all this subtext because there's these people who don't want AI, and these sort of trying to destroy it. And we'd say that it's maybe partially sort of suggested at the start that as I think a lot of people would maybe go, oh yeah, these are the good guys, because they're not wanting control of AI and computers on humanity. They want people to live natural lives, sort of thing. But it all twists around by the end, and basically it's that he should have been allowed to do what he wanted to do, because basically he gets subsumed in this supercomputer, this scientist, and he's going to make absolutely everything. So the whole of the world is like nanoparticles, is in absolutely everything. So everything is one big giant like internet. So that everything can be interconnected, so that nature is all one big system and things can be directed to heal everything up, and it's all through the power of AI. And it's like, these are things that are already present in the cosmos, and it's our connections with the source and the spiritual, that, you know, these things, magic if you like, these transmutations which a lot of the ancients were talking about, these things can be really attained, I believe. And that's what so many of the ancients were. Again, that's why I believe they had all these alignments with the megalithic sites where they did the rituals. It was about knowing the times when these highest levels of energy will be, when these particular alignments, the solstices, but also on the bigger cycles when there will be alignments with the center of the galaxy, and at times when there would be the strongest possibility that you could get this transmutation, because you will be channeling this greatest concentration of energy from the sun, the moon, but also back further, the sun behind the sun, the galactic center. But also, I think there's a lot to be said for that there may also be warnings within a number of these sites of when these incredible bursts of energy were actually causes of great cataclysm and destruction. And perhaps sometimes destruction does have to precede a new creation and some greater cycle. But if that does happen, then that should only happen in the natural order of events. It's not for humans to play God or to try to think that they can affect this change. Which is not to say, of course, you know, even the megalithic sites, they were people building on the landscape. They were constructing these things. They were making them out of the landscape. They were building these technologies of the time. So it's not to say that we shouldn't try and build technology. We shouldn't try and use science to create greater understanding. But I suppose it's like everything. As I was saying before, it always comes down to the fact it's who has control of the information, who has control of the means of transferring the information, who has the means of getting the power that that transformation will give you. And we know that's so often the bad guys. But let's keep on hoping for our own positive transformation. I'm really pleased. Thank you for listening. It's great to have all these friends from before who've come back. They haven't abandoned us, even though we haven't done many live streams for recent times. There's Margaret, there's Linda, there's Green Tea, there's Johnny Fettler, there's Whisperoon. Oh, it's lovely to see you all. It's been great. Yeah, you're right, Green Tea. It's like, it's one of these things where science, or well, I say science, but it's what they've trust the science, you know, it's with a capital letter, and it's because it's their version of it. And that capital letter often, you know, signifies the snake. Actually, when the World Health Organization has the snake on it, because it has been a positive symbol about healing. But again, these things get subverted. But yeah, I saw a meme somewhere, and it's like, scientists have done all this research and they've found that the cause of this and that bad thing is actually scientists, because that is it. It's like, at bottom, even if you're a normie, and even if you just believe what comes out, it's like these things that are causing all this ill health. I know obviously they're not in the normie land, they're certainly not going to believe that in recent years cause things, but you know, if you believe in what they're saying about the climate, then in their narrative, that's because of industry, it's because of things that have been built. So it's been things that have been built through science. So even in their sort of normie land, it's science that's caused destruction, you know. But yeah, then they say, oh yeah, we've caused this destruction, but it's all right, we've built this other thing that's going to help save us from the destruction that we've just caused. But I know we did it, I know we broke the last thing, but you've got to trust us because we're now going to fix it with this new thing. But don't worry, there's not going to be any problems with this new thing. It's not going to possibly go wrong like the old thing that we made. Trust us with the new thing. Couldn't possibly go wrong. And we all trust them, absolutely, don't we? So Tibetan monks singing, yes, again, in terms of the frequencies, it's a common thing, isn't it, Margaret? It's Gregorian chants, yeah. You know, I think pretty much every belief system you can think of, there's they know how to use energies, whether it's light, you know, obviously in cathedrals you've got these amazing windows, and whether it's the constructions, the geometry, obviously they know about, again, the sacred geometry, the idea again of certain you know, ways of building things that, again, and a lot of that, as I said, is relating to, it will create certain frequencies. And you get things like feng shui, again, which around, as I say, I mentioned, it's apparently to do with not traversing these dragon lines of energy and being in tune with that, being in tune with the earth energies. But also, again, it's about space. But yeah, all of this, I suppose, you know, it does come down to information when you look at it in that most broadest sort of mathematical scientific sense. You know, I suppose it's another way of saying energy, really. It's just, and the way that energy is manipulated, it can affect changes on people, and we know that. Like you mentioned the example of singing Tibetan monks Gregorian chants. We know, you know, Tibetan singing bowls, whatever it may be. These different energies will transform, and even if that's just on a mental level of making you feel better, we again, science acknowledges, you know, with the placebo effect, when they have to give a pretend pill to a certain level of people, or they're supposed to if they're doing it right, like a control group, because they acknowledge that just people literally thinking in their heads that they're getting something that's going to cure them, in so many cases the power of the mind can affect a physical transformation, and it can, and people can get well. So that is something that's acknowledged in normie science, you know, that's so dismissive of that sort of idea on the surface, but the basis is built into their systems, that they know that there's on some level, people, just by believing that they've a different mindset, can change the physical reality of their well-being. And yeah, I mean, it can be abused in terms of the, you know, the hippy dippy, oh yeah, we're all going to be love and light. But I think, yeah, you try and keep a positive energy, but we also know that there is the dark energy around as well, and that there needs to be that intertwining serpents, there needs to be that recognition of that dark energy. and that can also obviously do transformations. But do apologize, Ben, if you'd ever listen back on this. Your gas spannering at the moment. I know that's Ben's. I do apologize, Ben. It was a bit impromptu that we did this. I just thought it would be good to get something else up there. I haven't seen you all for a little while. We've got a few new subscribers in recent times, which is probably because I haven't done anything. That's why we got new subscribers. Now I've probably got a new live stream up there. Everyone will probably desert us. But is everyone okay out in the world of madness? How are we, Margaret? Some things are a slower vibration, but I think us humans are heading towards individuation. Yeah, I like that. And well, yeah, I won't bang on too much, but I've mentioned before I wrote this novel called The Individual, and the meaning of the word changed in the early modern era. Individual used to mean indivisible from the whole, so everything was one, but then it became this modern meaning, so an individual is separate from everything else. So I think we need a bit of both. This is one I believe from my wife. Fuck knows what he's banging on about. Sounds clever, mind. Well, thank you. That's the nicest thing you've ever said about me, my lovely wife. Thank you very much. Well, yeah. So let's go back to the new comments. Right. Happy equinox. Happy New Year. Wow. Yeah. Oh well, and I'm see. This is me banging on about bloody solstices and equinoxes and what's happening in the sky. And there's blooming equinox coming up. You know, I mean, there has been a hell of a lot going on in the sky. I mean, there was an alignment of the 7 planets. We did go up in the hill. We saw a few of them. Don't think we quite got all of them, but it was spectacular. It was beautiful. We've been lucky. Bearing in mind what I've said recently, there's been a few clear nights, and it has been really stunning. The stars. I was a bit disappointed. I went out, got up early. I've had a few days off work, but I set my alarm to get up at 5:30 to go and see the partial lunar eclipse. Here it was only partial view in UK, but couldn't see it. Unfortunately, on that particular morning, it was cloud. Oh, you missed it as well, Guiti. I was just about to ask because it was. See you, Johnny. Yeah, because it was a full eclipse viewable in the US, wasn't it? Jay Widener and talking with Sheldon Moore, which very interesting chats. I do recommend them. But they were wondering if that was going to be a transformative moment, moving into a new cycle. The lunar eclipse that's just happened. So, but again, these times I think were our times of particular energy. Just the night before we did see, obviously it hadn't fully crossed to be the eclipse at that point. It was a few hours before, late the night before, Thursday night, but it was already, there was like an aura of red around the moon. It was really bright, and there was a bit of cloud, but it was like blasting through it. It was really dramatic. But there does I don't know, just something does seem clear in the sky, or there just seem to be a lot of things happening. So maybe there's something. We talked about the sun being more yellow. Maybe there is just something that's happening in the stars. Solar eclipse on the 29th too. Yeah, Margaret. I've just been reading that there's going to be a full eclipse. That's, I think, Spain and Gibraltar are the only countries in Europe that are going to be able to see it. But so it's going to be in 2027, and it's going to be viewable in the Middle East, this total solar eclipse. And I think it's going to be something like the biggest or the longest totality, as they call it, that's going to be the for until 21 something or other, and it's going to be viewable in Egypt. So there's a few tours being advertised. I mean, blimey, that would be amazing. See a total eclipse in Egypt, like amid some unbelievable temple from millennia ago, which will again be aligned with the cosmos. That would, I'm sure there'll be loads of people there, of course. Viewable other places in the Middle East as well, which would be also amazing, of course. But yeah, there's a lot of things coming to pass in terms of the alignments with the heavens. So let's hope that it's positive, people. But I guess, like we say, we've all got a plasma ball inside us, so no matter what the plasma ball is doing up in the sky, however many of them there are, keep your own plasma balls emitting and generating. And I love you all, and it's so great. Thank you so much for supporting us and coming back and listening to me warble on for another hour and a half plus. And keep posted. It's going to be a while for my book. It's going to be most of the year being written, because it's just a lot to do. But maybe I can get something else out. Watch this space a little bit earlier. But yeah, lots of exciting things ahead, and certainly we'll be posting stuff and keeping in contact with you all. But yeah, love you all loads, and thanks for watching. Speak to you again very soon.